questions or? Nope. Okay, I'll move my report if I have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Scott. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving along. Sorry, bear with me. What have we got next? Oh, confirmation of the minutes. So the minutes of the Environmental Services Committee meeting held on the 5th of September in the report. Would someone like to move that we confirm them as a true and correct record of the meeting? Thank you, Councillor Parker, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Oliver. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the reports. The first report is 7.1, which, just when I find it, is the actions register update. So the purpose is just to make sure we're on top of actions that are raised throughout various meetings. The first action was the scope of the second climate change role, which my understanding is part of the discussions for the long-term plan, unless, Mr Dixon, you're hiding from me. You have anything more to add to that? I don't think so. Is he listening? I'm not sure. No. Okay. The second one is the Rakitata Revival Program update. So my understanding is there's been 2 meetings recently, and so the first one that occurred a couple of weeks ago was the Mana to Mana group that Mr Ellis attended. And did you have anything in particular you wanted to update on that meeting? I know it's difficult for you because it's the first one you've attended, but if there's anything you'd like to update us on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, appreciate it was something that in my capacity as acting was a little bit left field. However, the meeting itself was actually well attended, to be fair. There were a number of discussions. I don't think any of the discussions that we had were new, but the main focus essentially was coming to terms with their what it is they were actually focusing on, which from what I understand isn't quite confirmed, if I can put it like that. So there was some kind of an adjournment, if you like, to the next meeting, and also there is the potential for an update from the steering group, which may have some further details relating to that.
Cool. Thank you, Mr Ellis. Mr Karen, I believe you attended the steering group meeting last week and just wondered if you'd like to give any update on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct. On Friday, I was attended a steering group meeting for the Rangitata Revival. Went for a couple of hours, and there were a number of matters discussed. One of them, in no particular order, was around funding commitments. ECAN noted that their funding comes to an end at the end of December, and the Jobs for Nature funding, I understand, is also going to come to an end. ECAN did note that they had a maintenance budget of about 600,000, I think was the number I recorded. I noted that in terms of our council's commitment, our commitment to Peel Forest was a very substantial one and was the major contribution we were currently making to that. Other matters that were discussed, and the South Branch was also discussed at this meeting. Lynn's noted that there are quite a number of legal issues in terms of landowner issues down on the South Branch. DOC also voiced that they were aware of concerns of various farming interests down in that area and other landowner interests. Timaru District, through myself, also noted those were concerns we had received. What is proposed is that there will be a member of added to the steering group and the Mana to Mana group. They will have landowner representation become part of those. That's the proposal. They haven't named anybody as yet, but that's the proposal. And then the other matter discussed was the process for adoption of the strategy, and agreed that the strategy really had to come back to the various councils, so that would be ECAN, Ashburton and ourselves, and we would each have to individually endorse it before it could get endorsed, before the representatives of those councils could then say to the steering group that it had endorsement. So I'm just looking through my notes. I think that covered most of the discussion. And iwi did note that this is a very, what they're dealing with here is a very long-term plan. So that really, I think, was the summary of my notes. Happy to take questions which might refresh my memory as well.
Do we have any questions on that? So if the strategy is going to come back to council, we can probably then remove that item from the update report, because there will be no further update until the strategy comes back. Is that correct?
Well, you could do that. I think it would be, you'd certainly want some method of just making sure it was kept live, and if there's any other updates that they are brought, whether it's via Mana to Mana group or steering group. I think they're going to host that strategy, the draft, as it stands, not as it's finalised, but just as it stands. I think they're going to host it on the DOC website so that people will be able to what is there at the moment.
Okay, well, I'm pretty comfortable it will be on our radar, and so we could remove that from the action item, because we don't probably need to talk about it every meeting until the strategy comes back. So if everyone is comfortable with that, the recommendation is that the Environmental Services Committee receives and notes the updates to the actions register, and can I add that we note the second action on the Rangatato Revival Program update is now closed. Does somebody want to move that? Thank you, Mayor Bowen, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Oliver. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Karen. So we move on to our next report, which is the Environment Canterbury post-winter air briefing. So the purpose of this report is just to give us an update on the post-winter air briefing. And we did have Mr. Brian Reeves from ECAN, but I understand we have Paul from ECAN. Thank you. I'll welcome you up, Paul. Yes, Councillor Burt, did you have a question? Sorry.
Just in terms of a conflict of interest, that I work for ECAN, I'll stay at the bench, but I won't involve myself in any discussions. Thank you.
Happy with that, and thank you, Councillor Burt. Sorry, so invite Paul and Hamish Burrell, our District Planning Manager, up to present their report. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Mayor Bowen, councillors. My name is Paul Hopwood. I'm a Principal Implementation Advisor with Environment Canterbury. Apologies from Brian Reeves. He's unwell today. He was going to lead the presentation today. So we're hoping to have some colleagues joining us online, but I think there's been some with connections. So hopefully they can join us when the time's right. We've got less time for this presentation than we hoped for, so I'll move through things fairly quickly. You should have a slide pack in your agenda, which I'll move through. We don't have a presentation to show today.
Sorry, Paul, we didn't have the slide pack in our agenda that I'm aware of, so if we can get it up on screen, is that possible?
Yeah, it was sent through to your team here.
No. Is it possible to get it up if I change the agenda round? We don't have a PowerPoint version. Who would have it been sent? Can we get a printed copy? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Paul. I really apologise, but I think it would be more beneficial to you if we have that in front of us.
No, understood. Yeah, I
Yep.
expect that was in your agenda.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So, no, we'll bring you back at the end. We'll do the other two reports first and then bring you back if that's okay. I really apologise for that. Sorry. Okay, so just I will forget. So we're going to move on to item 7.3, which is the climate response policy. So invite up Mr. Taylor, welcome Reece, and Mr. Dixon to present this report. So the purpose is to consider a draft climate change policy. So just bearing in mind this is just a draft, so Mr. Taylor is keen for feedback from councillors, and then as it states in the report, we'll be consulting with local iwi, and then we'll bring it back to council early next year for adoption. Mr. Taylor, as I advised before, we have a jam-packed agenda all day, so we will take your report as read, but I invite you just to make a couple of notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. The Arguments for producing a climate change policy is to allow us to gather our thoughts, to be coherent in actions, and to have information ready for the long-term plan process so that it'll guide the work within the team. When you have a role which is working across the whole council, as I have as climate change advisor, I can't have simultaneous meetings with everybody, and putting into policy form the directions that are being recommended is a really effective way of doing this. We've looked at the precedent set and the example set by a lot of other councils, both close neighbours and others spread across the country. So there's a lot of common ground here between what's suggested in this draft and what's being used elsewhere in the country. We've offered it as a draft. I think there are a couple of phrasing improvements that we can easily make, and indeed the chair of the committee and myself have had conversations about some of those opportunities for felicitous editing. But the direction is established here, and we'll welcome your comments and input so that we can bring back a completed policy statement to a meeting early in 2024.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. Are there any questions? Comments from any councillors? Mayor Bond?
Oh, yeah, I think, you know, the key ones for me, and I haven't seen another climate change policy, so I don't know what to reference it to, but the key things for me is actually the work plan that you've sort of, that are sitting within it, which is the emissions inventory, which is, you know, which is pretty much done, the district collaboration, that's great, and the action planning for TDC. So I think for me it's covered those key things is actually in regard to actually what we need to get on and do. So that's really great. But I probably don't have any further comments. My only actually other comment would be, and I know we've worked a lot through this, but the definition of climate change itself, and I understand the reason why it's written like that is because it's quite real, but it's quite it's quite challenging for some in regard to the focus on, you know, species extinctions and some of those sort of things, and I just don't know if it needs that fullness of definition, if you know what I mean. I'm actually comfortable either way, but it's just interesting that we don't want this to be something that people are scared of, and that's why there needs to be some balance in our approach. And yeah, those are probably my only comments at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Bond. Actually, similar feedback which I've given to Reece already as well. Some of my other feedback was kind of along the lines of being clear about whether CCOs are included in this or not, and actually having a focus on not just mitigation but also resilience of infrastructure and things like that. And I had a very quick look at Ashburton District Council's one this morning, which I think there's some things in there that Mr Taylor and I could have a look at and pick up, but definitely Mr Taylor was open to feedback, so if anyone has any, now's your chance. If not, is there anything else? Oh, sorry, Councillor Booth, of course.
I think just in the introduction, the very first phrase is actually quite important, actually. And I think, you know, rather than it should be really to mitigate the impact, the suspected impact on our ratepayers. And I think that's where we should be concentrating. That's something that we have actually got control of, rather than that big picture of thinking you're going to save the world. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Any other questions, comments, feedback? No? Okay, anything you wanted to add to that, Mr Taylor?
Briefly on the point of referring not just to tackling what little we can do, but usefully on emissions, you're absolutely right that we have to put climate adaptation in all the points where it needs mentioned in the document. So yeah, agreeing with you, Councillor Booth, yes, a focus on adaptation, adaptive responses, accompanied by doing more of the good and less of the bad in terms of our council work in-house.
Yep. Great, thank you. If there's no other comments, we'll move to the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the Environmental Services Committee adopt a climate change response policy for use principally within council and to inform the long-term plan. Does somebody want to move that? So that is that we're going to adopt a policy. This policy is in its draft form and we will adopt it. So I guess the recommendation is giving Reece the okay to carry on with this work and bring us back something. Is everyone okay with that recommendation?
Yeah, it's not clear though, is it?
No, okay. So shall I reword the
Just
recommendation?
perhaps slightly, yeah.
Okay, so the recommendation that the Environmental Services Committee endorse a climate change policy for council and council officers continuing to work on it. Sorry, that's getting a bit wordy now. To bring back to us to adopt in February. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, it should have, excuse me, Madam Chair, but should it be endorse a draft policy, maybe?
Endorse, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So I can move that from the chair. Does anyone want to, Councillor Booth, I'm getting a bad vibe from your corner.
Yeah, I think that purpose policy, that those first words actually need to drive the policy, and if there's anything else driving it, it's going to be a load of rubbish.
So the recommendation is going to be that the Environmental Services Committee endorse a draft climate change response policy. No, we're still not going to get that right, are we? Endorse a draft, yeah, to inform the long-term plan, and we will get the final policy back in February to adopt.
I think that helps, Madam Chair. So to endorse a draft,
Yep.
to bring it back for adoption early next year.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Too many things to think about this morning. Yes. Have you got that, Rachel? Sorry. Have you got that typed there? Can I just read that back?
That the Environmental Services Committee endorse the climate change response draft policy. And then the rest of it.
Yep. Okay. Did everyone hear that? Okay, so I'll move that from the chair. Does somebody want to second it? Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All in favour? Against? Thank you, Councillor Booth. Do you want that recorded? Thank you. Right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Dixon. I believe you're doing the second report as well, so I'll just ask you to remain there as I find my place in the meeting papers. So our next report is 7.4. So this is the second report on the Timaru District Climate Change Strategy. So the purpose of this report is to present the draft commercial food resilience sub-strategy based on material from a July workshop that was independently facilitated. And secondly, a set of suggested actions, which are at point 11 in this report, for us to consider to deliver, and that this list of action has been derived from the two reports that we've had presented to this committee, the first one back in May, I believe, and this one today. So, Mr. Taylor, if you just want to, I'll take the report as read, but if you'd just like to highlight some of the key points.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first comment is just to express our continued delight at the voluntary and community input that this process has had. Producing a district-wide strategy has been a really useful contribution by the wider public to our work. Along with having that public contribution means, of course, that not all the ideas generated are automatically going to be council policy. So it's useful that we've had a look first at some council policy. The suggestions being brought forward by that strategy discussion include some practical actions that we may wish to take as a council. And at our invitation, the facilitator of the process, along with his advisory group, have put forward a set of first 10 or so ideas. This is by no means drawing on all the generated ideas from that strategy process. There may well be more to come, but they put forward a first 10 for consideration, and they're in the attached report, starting at page 33 in the council agenda papers. The suggestion made to this meeting is that, thinking at governance level, councillors are invited to say whether you wish to be engaged in the topics raised in these 10 suggestions. give us guidance as a staff team so that we know which ones we should follow, and maybe give us guidance on others that you can see being involved. Because a key part of the design of the Timaru District Climate Strategy was to say, here is the issue, here's a possible response, but not to first guess who would be the action takers on each of those topics. That was part of their strategy and their approach. And in fact, the first of the suggestions they've invited us to look at is to pick up on the principles of the strategy, the principles that were taken, which include some very good points about process in thinking at a strategic level. The details of those principles were all in the first report, which came in May, but there's a brief summary of the key words of those principles on page 57 of your papers for today. That's probably it from me for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So I think the best use of our time here is perhaps if I ask for any general comments or questions on both Mr. Taylor's report and Dr. Phil Driver's report, and then we will work through those 11 areas, sorry, not 11 areas, the areas at point 11 is what I meant to say, so that we can give some clear guidance to council officers on how we want to proceed with this. So first up, are there any general comments or feedback on either of the reports? No. Yeah, Councillor Scott?
For me, I'm just putting it out there, I don't feel comfortable today making any decisions on the 10 actions. I feel we as a group need to discuss them in more detail, and we do not have time today in a workshop, but I'd also like that the community group that actually help support the writing of Dr. Phil's report is in the room as well. I feel like I can't make any decisions on any of these actions with more detail. They're literally one page, and I have a lot of around some in particular. And so I'm just putting it out there that today I feel very uncomfortable about making a decision on 10 actions that needs a lot more discussion.
No, that's a fair comment. Are there any other views in the room on that? Given that Mayor Bowen and myself were in attendance at a lot of, not all, but a lot of those working, the community ones, sorry. But if you feel we would get a better outcome from this, I mean, we need to be focused on what is the best outcome for ratepayers and the community from a workshop. What is the feeling on that, Mayor Bowen?
Yeah, look, I'm of the view actually we need to, rubber needs to hit the road, and so we are at a point that all that work's been done and we need to make some decisions on as far as the go forward. So, and happy to take any questions. I know Michelle was at, Councillor Pye was at majority of those ones, and we've had lots of information. I take your point, but I think we could just forever and a day and not get, most of these are just a pretty solid action plan. We just work through them and endorse them or not. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, Councillor Puddington.
I'm just concerned like there's too many, if you know what I mean. Number 2 and 3 could be combined.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the process we'll work through now, because I agree. Yep. And there's some that I think you'll see that council officers haven't actually recommended, so I don't think we'll end up with this many anyway.
Okay, that's cool.
Yep.
I mean, we need something that's workable and achievable.
Yep, 100%, and effective is what we need to focus on too. So if there's no other comments, shall we just start at the top of the list? So the first one talks about the support the principles of the Timaru District climate change strategy. So this was included in the first report that we got back in May. And I just actually wanted to clarify, Mr. Taylor, if I may. So I'm supportive of the principles in their headlines, but in that report there was quite a lot of discussion and actions and other things within those principles, and I just want to confirm that we're just agreeing to the principles, which I can run through for the benefit of the other members. They are, and to be fair, they're similar principles to what's been used in the Christchurch City Council climate change strategy, so they're pretty I don't want to say they're standard, they're just not unusual. So I'm pretty comfortable with them, and so they talk about equity, justice and fairness, understanding knowledge, education and skills, future-proofing, resilience, urgency and long-term thinking, support, sharing and collaborative and weaving, whānau, family, whānui and community, precaution, transparency, work with the power of nature, realistic action, and determine actions first, then who does them. And then it talked about some other principles around integrity, honesty, and things. So they've already been presented to council on the May meeting. So just, is everyone comfortable with adopting those principles or not? Councillor Puddington?
Yeah, look, I'm keen because as it sits, it's just, you're sending someone to a document you can't get through, you know, without any understanding. But perhaps we should see those principles so we can read them and have some time.
Yep, okay. So how about we, they were presented to this committee in May, so I'm here without, perhaps if you could provide some feedback on them once you've had a look at them, we can see, but they're pretty just standard principle and values and guidelines on how you make decisions going forward. You could wordsmith them forever, but I don't see that there's anything wrong in there or missing, is my view. Unless anyone has a contrary view. Mayor Bowen, you may have been at the workshop where the principles were discussed.
I'm in agreement, and you know, just a note, and this is just specific across all elected members.
Yep.
If there's a paper references to something, you have to do your work to go and find the information. So you need to come fully armed with the information that you require. The onus is on you as elected members to be able to make a decision. We're not going to put papers down the road just because you haven't actually made an effort to go and find something from a May paper. We just have to get on and get some of the stuff done. And so that's not meant with disrespect, but this is our role. So let's get on and get some stuff decided.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. So if we move on to points 2 and 3, and I agree that these could be combined, and this is specifically in regard to our coastal communities, and in my view, out of all of the work that Dr. Phil Driver did, this has probably highlighted this issue and is of most concern to me personally anyway. So the first point is update the coastal hut holders on the likely need for managed retreat, and then examine some managed retreat options. I wouldn't like to go to hut holders with a message of we need a retreat without some options, so I'd actually like to see those 2 points combined. And I know we've talked about it, we've had different meetings around that, and there are some challenges around whose responsibility and working with ECAN and that, but I'd actually really like to see that prioritised, not just hut holders but landowners along that whole stretch of road. Is there any other commentary or feedback on that action point, Mayor Bowen?
Yeah, look, you know, I agree this is a real risk for us, especially with that Milford community. I know the team, I think we're still working for pre-Christmas first conversations with some of those, I believe. Thanks, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I can fill you in on that. Yes, there is indeed some preparation in place. We're looking to your guidance on this issue, but subject to that guidance, a group of representatives from the staff here, including my own role and emergency management, plus colleagues from Environment Canterbury, are prepared to begin a process of visits. And our initial visits will be to meet people and listen. We're not arriving with a ready-made set of responses. We're there to engage and to listen and be interested, and we'll follow that up with work looking at options, but it would be done in collaboration with the local hut owners and the local residents.
I'm very supportive of that. I just wonder, I'm concerned that I know of one family that farm along there who have had various people come and listen, and nothing has happened. And I just want to know that this time something will happen.
I can understand that sense of urgency, particularly if you've got your farmland being inundated. The great challenge for this work is absence of central government clarity, and certainly missing legislation. The Climate Change Adaptation Act is not finished, and the decisions about who will fund the balance between taxpayer, ratepayer, private ownership and insurers is not clear. So those are some of the key background issues which make it hard for everybody involved, but we definitely have to be an open and honest conversation.
I think one of the principles that we just talked about was to worry about who pays for it last and make a plan. so long as the cost is not so prohibitive that nobody's going to be able to pay for it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Any other comments on that action point? No, so the next, are you getting enough guidance from this, Mr Taylor, because that is the plan? Are you getting a clear enough guidance from how we're working through this?
Yes, so we're doing okay at the moment, thank you.
Thank you. So the next one is around collecting robust information on economic, social, environment and cultural, I've hidden that with a note, risks and impacts, I think it says, of climate change in the Timaru district. The officer recommendation is to support perhaps an efficient collaboration with neighbouring councils, Kenzie and Maddie. I probably need a bit more detail before I support this one. Economic impact reports that don't come cheaply, I believe, and I wonder what we're going to end up with out of that report.
Madam Chair, we've had contact with colleagues who are part-time officers, both Mackenzie and Waimati. They're interested to see if it's effective and efficient, I suppose cost-effective, for us to collaborate on gathering information. We certainly would like to look at that, so we're not just looking at Timaru District, but we're working on a wider geographic area. The nature of, for example, the rivers in this area would suggest that collaboration would work better as well if we work across several districts. We don't have a costing for work. We haven't, at this stage, worked out what would have to be done by expertise from elsewhere and therefore involve expenditure. But we'd like to begin examining what's already available, particularly through Environment Canterbury's resources and NIWA. And there's some good work being done by NIWA at the moment, which will be shared with us during 2024. So the key focus for us would be on finding out what's being gathered with national funding, make that available, digest it, and then see where the gaps are. So we do an analysis for what we don't know and have to do more work to find out. But we're interested to do it collaboratively between staff at the councils rather than just Timaru on its own.
Does anyone else have any comments on this? Because Councillor
I
Scott.
think that this is one that needs more work, and it needs to be scoped out. What are we actually trying to achieve? What is the cost to it? And I'm unsure right now who we're directing to do this. Is it TDC or this Climate Trust? So I feel this one needs to be brought back.
I agree, yep. Any other comments on that one? Councillor Piddington?
Yeah, look, I'm the same. I mean, Mackenzie, last time I looked, doesn't have coastal inundation, which is our main priority amongst many other things. So, yeah, I've got to be careful with that, I think.
Yeah, so I think the guidance there, Mr Taylor, is that one needs some more work with some costings, exactly what it's going to look like before council will endorse that one. Councillor Booth?
I think this is a good example of when things get out of hand and we're not actually focused on what we're supposed to be doing. It's a waste of time.
Yes, Mayor Nigel.
Look, what I would say once this, what I do like about this is the collaboration, and ECAN probably need to be involved if they do. Do they have someone local in this space, Mr Taylor? ECAN, do they have someone local in this space?
Environment Canterbury would definitely be able to contribute information, and we would hope that the climate change partnership across the whole county, whole region, would allow councils to share information effectively. See, I don't see this as something we can launch into tomorrow, but I do see it as being very relevant to the climate change partnership regional level and potential collaboration with our neighbours in 2024.
Yeah, but I agree with the sentiment of the room that we need to identify what we're trying to achieve.
Yep.
But the collaboration is good. Thank you.
Okay, trying to speed the process up. Point 5, any thoughts on the resilient food supplies for the district, given that commentary has that we have 3 days here if we get cut off by bridges like we have done in the past. Any steer from the governance group as to whether that's something that council needs to be working on? Councillor Scott.
I question this too. Surely this is Emergency Management 101 and we have done this work. So I'd be very concerned if this is an action that should be well and truly covered by police, hospitals, food providers. If we're saying in this community right now we have not got that under control, God help us.
Any response? Mr Dixon, looks like you want to say something?
Yeah, or just a comment, I guess, on that. If you think back to the 2019 Rangitata flood event, we came extremely close to having no food in this district because everything comes from Christchurch and it's just-in-time delivery. So there is perhaps a little risk there, I think.
That's reliance on a supermarket. It's not. So what this is saying is, how can we provide food without reliance on supermarkets? Surely we know how to do that. I know how to do that. My community that I live in would know how to do that. So is it more not an education process around what we would do as a community? I went to a Federated Farmers presentation last week at Rural and Provincial, and we were told we have sufficient amount of food in this country to feed us all for a very long time. So I'm a little bit confused. If we're relying on a supermarket, well, there's an education piece in here for how to feed your neighbour.
Thank you. Councillor Scott-Mearborn.
Yeah, to feed your neighbour, I love it. I think there is definitely an education piece, but it sits with, for me, it sits within a role of the civil defence team. I would have thought it's a response to an event as opposed to climate specific. So, in my view, needs to come out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Booth, did you have something to add?
Biggest risk is KFC will run out of chicken.
Biggest risk or your biggest concern? Thank you. Okay, next one, I note that officers doubt that the scale will significantly initially, but do see some scope here, but I think perhaps that's probably not one of our priorities unless somebody has an alternative view. I'm not seeing any, I'm seeing shakings of the head. Next one is to enable and inspire reduction in non-commercial transport carbon emissions through education campaigns, and perhaps done with or region-wide, which the officers support this and have value in mitigating emissions, and suggest a coordinated educational action with ECAN and NGOs. Any views on that one? I'm probably okay with that if it's achievable within your work pattern, Reece. Anyone? No.
Same, I think it's an education piece, but, you know, it does need to be provided for in some shape or form, but I agree with you in regard to capacity is the question.
Capacity is the problem, yeah.
Capacity and priority is.
So probably not the highest priority, Mr Taylor, but if you're able to get to that. Supportive, and then there is some enable and inspire some property water-based management to increase drought resilience, and there was something similar to this one. No, there wasn't. Yeah, I'm not, my commentary was I'm supportive of that, but I wasn't sure how effective it would be, and so I didn't think it would be a priority. But is there any other views?
I would just wonder, when I read that, I thought, oh gosh, what does that mean for water, what's the word, quality? Like, I don't know how that works with ECAN. I know we have people gather rainwater all the time, but if we were encouraging it, and it would be good to see what best practice would look like for that, and what would it cost a person? So say, you know, like it would be a really interesting piece to do, like if you were to do some of this, like what would the average household have to invest to do this? Like, because it's sort of a bit open-ended, like, you know, if it's $20,000 per household to do this, well, could be a major barrier. So it'd be an I'm not saying it's not a bad idea, just saying it feels like it's a bit big.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Burt, did you have something to add? Yeah.
I mean, remember, these are aspirational, and in this one it does qualify by saying other councils in drought areas have already moved on this. We need to know what that looks like, what is moved on it, to what level, and with also underpinned by the potential costs and things like that. Yeah. Rainwater, as you say, water quality and the ability to drink, you know, is it just drinking water? Is it about, you know, the resilience of food and having water available for those things?
So more detail required on this, councillor Parker, and then I think Mr Dixon's got something
Just
to
a
add.
comment, I'm supportive of this Action 8 regarding rainwater collection and looking at planning and regulation, especially with inbuilt and more intensification with housing. We've got less ground, more concrete, so we need to be looking at ways of collecting water, using our water, and growing our food. So I'm supportive of 8.
Thank you, councillor Parker. Mr Dixon, did you have something to add?
Yeah, this one here is about rainwater harvesting and basically collecting rainwater from your roof to use on your garden. It's not intended for any drinking water. It's just that better use, you know, we use potable water to literally use a lot of non-potable uses. So it's about harvesting that, and a lot of councils are doing it now.
Okay.
In fact, we've got provision in the new district plan, or proposed district plan, for actually do this, because it has the added benefit of actually reducing stormwater discharge as well.
Okay.
I'm
Yep, Mr.
certainly
Taylor.
supportive of those points. This is about stormwater management,
Yeah, okay.
and it may, in the future, if we have water meters introduced, become quite financially attractive for households to save stormwater rather than to pay for more expensive reticulated water.
Okay, thank you, Mr Taylor. So are we supportive of, councillor Parker has indicated support. Yep, okay, so supportive of that one. Last two, thank you for your patience, everyone. Enable and inspire personal actions about doubling the good and halving the bad. So this is another education piece that, whether it sits with TDC or another entity, Councillor Puddington, do you have a view?
It's the
on that?
same as number 7. Surely we wrap them all together, just in the good idea bucket.
Yes, yeah, okay, so we
But
probably just
way
wrap-
down.
Good point, yep. An education piece on reducing impact, yep, okay. And then the last one is explore climate resilient commercial scale food production options for the district. Was there any comments on that? Because obviously I
Yeah,
have
I
a
mean,
view,
this is,
but-
this is a fascinating one, sorry, on where it lies, isn't it? And so, and I know we've had lots of debate, and I still are of the view that that is going to sit with the sector itself largely. And I do even, and I know, you know, VT have done some work around what are alternative crops and those sorts of things, but how much focus should they be spending on it, I question, when actually it's probably going to be industry-led. I wouldn't say probably, it will definitely be industry-led. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. I'll share the exact view. My note was it needs to sit with industry, this one, but does anyone else have a view on whether this is something council should be working on? No? Okay, so that is the action point. So I think that gives you some good, clear guidance on the actions that we need to focus on, being those coastal communities, the number one, and then some of the stuff that we're not so keen to support. I just do have one other point, but around point 12, but did you have something just to wrap up on that?
I'm happy to hear your comments on it. I'll comment back if useful.
Okay. Sorry, I was just going to address the suggestion of an entity or trust that sits either supported by council or outside of council to help with this education piece. And I'm just wondering, it's discussed in Dr. Driver's report with some quite clear frameworks on how that trust, and just wondering what councillors' view is on whether Timaru District Council support the trust or help with the setup of it. Councillor Puddington.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's our role. Maybe we support it if someone goes out and they come in the usual way as everyone else and asks us and competes for funding. I don't think we should be setting it up. I don't think we should give them money straight away. We need to know what they're going to do, and they just go into that competitive bucket of money that we have. That's where I sit.
Thank you, Councillor Puddington. Anyone else have some views on this? Bowen?
Yeah, I'm pretty aligned with Councillor Puddington in that regard. There are donations and loans. there's a long-term plan opportunity, which I'm sure we will get a submission from. But as far as those actions, majority of them that have, we know where they sit, and I'm still not of the view of what the trust does. I think it supports education, but as an investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't think that's, would ever survive the snuff test. So until I actually know exactly what it's going to achieve in regard to those actions, and majority of those actions are council-led or industry or government, and I'm still struggling to find a purpose.
So I support your view, Mayor Bowen. Councillor Parker, sorry.
Yeah, I'm supportive of knowing what our key points are, and also, I mean, we have the Sustainable South Canterbury Trust. I'm not sure how far they will branch out to sustainability.
No, so my understanding is that there's been various conversations, and Mr Taylor is actually a member of that trust, and they don't have the capacity to do that, and they have a clear focus on what they want to do, and the capacity's not there. What I was going to ask Mayor Bowen is what needs to happen to have a definitive answer on this trust proposal? Some people were saying they want more information, but it was quite clear in that report how it's going to work. Do we want to make the decision now, or do we want a proposal brought back or a submission to the long-term plan and it sits there? Because I feel like this trust idea has been bubbling away in the background and we haven't made a decision on it.
I agree. I mean, we could make a decision today, but actually budget's not going to be allowable until the next financial anyway. So
a submission on the long-term plan.
For those out there in the public that have an interest in this being a solution, I think the best process would be coming through the long-term plan as a submission. Council officers can still work with them as we would with anyone else wanting to make a long-term plan submission, and that should be the avenue.
Me too, is who are our collaboration partners with this? I believe it's not just us, where are our conversations with ECAN and all of those other councils,
Mr Taylor is part of a working group as part of the Mayoral Forum, and I'm part of a steering group as part of the Mayoral Forum on a region-wide climate change strategy. And so it's in its draft stages, and I'm not sure it's going to be, I'm not sure how duplication. We have that going on in the background that we're both part of, and then we have, the clear actions that our area we need to focus on, and I think we just need to see what comes out of that Canterbury plan as well. The feeling is we've probably had a head start on that with the work we're doing, which is good, and appreciate the work that has gone into this to date with the wider community. So, so in answer to your question, there are 2 region-wide groups working on it as well. Any other conversation on this report? If not, we can move to the recommendation. Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone. So the recommendation is that we receive the second report from the district-wide climate change strategy community process as attached, assembled by facilitator Dr. Phil Driver, and release this for publication combined with the first report, which was received by the committee in May 2023. My view is that it has been released for publication. It's part of these meeting papers which are in the public domain. Does anyone, are we happy to move the report based on that? Yep, thank you, Mayor Bowen. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Parker. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And the second recommendation is make governance level decisions on the 10 actions proposed in response to the climate change strategy, mostly from the first report and some from the second, which we've just worked through, so I'm happy to move that from if somebody wants to see. Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr Taylor, Mr Dixon. Appreciate the work you've put into that. Thank you. So we're just going to go back to report 7.2, and we have some printed copies. So welcome back up Hamish Burrell and Paul from Environment Canterbury, and thank you, Paul, for your patience while we sorted that out.
Yeah, Kia ora, councillors. Yeah, thanks for assistance of Megan getting these copies to you. I apologise for not having a PowerPoint for you. We've tried to through, but unfortunately they didn't work for us. So yeah, we've got two presentations to run through today. The first one on air quality and a second one on surface water quality. So we have some colleagues online. We've got Angie Scott and Teresa Abakane, who are our air quality scientists, and Shirley Hayward, who's a surface water quality scientist. So we'll kick off with the air quality presentation, and I just want to give a really brief introduction to air quality when we're talking about particulate matter and the health effects, what we're talking about there. So we refer to PM10 and PM2.5, that's particulate matter of 10 micrometers or less is PM10, and that incorporates the PM2.5, so that's the finer fraction. And so these fine particles can get very deep into the lungs and cause health impacts. And the finer particles, the PM2.5, is primarily from combustion sources, so from burning wood and coal, petrol, and diesel, and so on. The coarser part of the PM10 often comes from natural sources, so from dust and pollen fragments, vehicle movements on roads, and so on. So, yeah, just a bit of background to what we're talking about there. If you go on to the next slide, which talks about the health and air pollution in New Zealand update. There's an increasing body of evidence around health impacts from air quality and these particulate pollutants. And it's really showing that there are health effects, significant health effects at much lower concentrations that have been anticipated in the past. Our plans and the national air quality standards that we work to are based on older air quality standards. But in recent times, in fact in the last year, the World Health Organization have introduced some more stringent air quality guidelines, which are much lower concentrations than we have in our current plans. And there was a report last year, which was a health and air pollution in New Zealand update, which was based on 2016 health data, and that shows the health impacts from PM2.5 and also nitrogen dioxide. And the NO2 is primarily from vehicle emissions. And it's really showing the health impacts and the social costs of air pollution in New Zealand. It indicates that in Canterbury, air quality pollutants have a social cost of more than $2.8 billion. And the main sources of these pollutants, for particulate matter again, is from fires, from home heating, and the NO2 from motor vehicles. If we move to the next slide, that just shows a map of where we monitor air quality in Timaru. So we have a monitor in Timaru, in Anzac Square, and there's the current monitoring site is the Washdyke Alpine one. Previously it was monitored at the Washdyke Flat Road. And so we have a role to monitor air quality and to regulate air quality to meet air quality standards that come through from the National Environmental Standards and the Canterbury Air Plan. If we move to the next slide, that shows the results of air quality monitoring in Timaru District. So we've got 3 lines there, one for Timaru, one for Geraldine, and one for Washdyke, and that shows the coarser particulate matter, the PM10. And you can see in Timaru, which is the paler line, there's been a steady progression over the years. Air quality has been improving pretty steadily. In Geraldine, air quality is pretty good. We're close to zero exceedances of the air quality guidelines. But in Washdyke, towards the right of the graph there, you see that jump up. That jump up is also linked to the relocation of the monitoring site. But it shows there are the high levels of coarse particulate matter in the air around Washdyke. The following slide shows the air quality monitoring for the finer particulate matter, the PM2.5, and that's quite a different picture. We've got higher particulate concentrations fine particulate concentrations in Timaru, but low in Washdyke. So again, that just indicates that the contribution in Washdyke is from coarser particles, the dust. Moving to the next slide. that shows a table of our air quality monitoring sites, our polluted air sheds across Canterbury, and a bit of a league table of air quality exceedances. The box on the left shows exceedances of the PM10. The box on the right is the PM2.5. And you can see on the left there, Washdyke has got very high levels of PM10 exceedances, 34 this year. And the guideline under the national standards is for 1 exceedance per year. Timaru's on 6 for this year. And moving down, you see Geraldine has been pretty steadily on 1 or 0 exceedance over the last 5 years. But if you contrast that to the box on the right for the PM2.5, you can see Washdyke 0 exceedances for the finer particulate matter, whereas Timaru has 27 exceedances, and again those exceedances are linked to home heating, so combustion sources. Next slide again, please. So that, again, just to summarise the differences there. In Timaru, the main contribution to air quality is from residential sources, particularly home heating. We see exceedances at night, any day of the week, and particularly in winter, whereas in Washdyke, these are industrial sources from industrial boilers, dust from vehicle movements, and some of the other landscape suppliers, grain silos, other plants and industrial sources around the area. And those exceedances are primarily during the daytime and on weekdays, so they're quite clearly linked to industrial and commercial activity. And so for both those aspects, there's a role there for Environment Canterbury in how we apply our rules around home heating and industrial and land uses. But also a role for Timaru District Council in making sure that people put the right burners into their homes, and also in the land use planning around where industrial sites are and those reverse sensitivity impacts on residents close to those areas, and also potentially land use rules around unconsolidated sites and paving, for example, that might reduce dust sources. If we move to the next slide, that's a screenshot from the ECAN website, really showing some of the things that we do around improving air quality. So we provide information to the public around air quality and information on the rules, particularly around home heating. And we also provide financial assistance, so we have a subsidy scheme to help lower income households to swap out expired and expiring wood burners. And that's been run through Energy Smart in Timaru. Moving on to the next slide. And that's a summary of the rules relating to home heating in Timaru. And we've been doing some work in recent years and in the last year or so, and we'll also going to do some more promotion moving into next year around expiring burners. There are a number of burners expired or expiring in Timaru, and we're looking to do a mail out to properties with expired burners and promote our home heating scheme for those low income households. If we move to the final slide, that really summarises the work that's ongoing and what's coming up. And we're also looking at what our opportunities are to reduce those dust sources in Washdyke from the industrial sources. Many sites operate under permitted activity rules, but there is a requirement there for sites to have a dust management plan and to reduce dust emissions so they're not having an adverse effect beyond their boundary. So that concludes the air quality presentation, and if my colleagues are online, maybe we can take questions at the end for the air and the surface water quality, but I'll hand over to Shirley Hayward online if you're available, Shirley. Can we unmute? Excuse me.
Morena, are you waiting for us to talk?
Yeah, thanks, Shirley. We can hear you now.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry. I'm Shirley. I'm just going to turn our camera on if we can get that going. Bottom left. Great. So Morena, my name is Shirley Hayward. I'm the science team leader for the surface water quality team, and I have with me Lucy Just, a hydrologist in the hydrology team. So we've been asked to give a brief talk around basically the state of the freshwater resources, and in particular going into the summer ahead. So we've just prepared a few slides, and I understand you have them in front of you. Is that correct?
That's correct, thanks.
Yeah, so if we just move on to the first slide that talks about the NIWA climate summary. And basically what that slide is saying that NIWA is forecasting that we're in and moving into an El Nino type weather system, and that's likely to intensify over the next 3 months. And the consequences of that are predictions of temperatures are likely to be above average for the east coast of the South Island, with frequent west and northwest winds, which will likely lead to a higher frequency of hot days. That's days above 25 degrees. I was in Timaru yesterday, and I think you had one of those days. Soil moisture, rainfall, and river flows are likely to be near normal or below normal in the east. Oops. Juggly. So if you move on to the next slide, there is a series of hydrographs which show groundwater levels for Environment Canterbury's groundwater level monitoring network, and particularly ones that are close to Timaru District Council's main water supplies. And really what this illustrates is, particularly when we look at the last significant El Nino season, which was around the 2016 period, if you can remember back then, or for somebody that can actually remember back to the 97-98 droughts. They were the last kind of significant El Nino seasons. I guess a couple of key things that we can say from our monitoring network for those periods were shallow groundwater, particularly groundwater, less than 5 or 6 meters deep. Some wells actually went dry during that period. And certainly groundwater levels did drop. One of the key things is that they do recover. They do recover as soon as you start to get some significant rainfall. But during those 2 dry periods, for the data that we do have, we can expect lower groundwater levels, and really shallow bores could potentially go dry if it becomes severe and prolonged. If I move on to the next slide, have I missed a slide? No. I'm just going to pass over to Lucy, and she's going to talk to a few slides about the current state of flows in the Timaru district.
Yeah, cool. So this first map is the median flow percentiles for October across the district. So it's a percentile rank of the median October flow compared to a relative list of all the previous October median flows. And as you can see, everything's sort of average percentile rank for October. We have one that's high and one that's very high, but everything is kind of looking relatively normal there. And then 2 hydrographs for different sites. So one is Pariora at Huts, and the other one is the Opahi at Rockwood, and that's overlaid with the 2 El Nino or strong El Nino prolonged drought events. And you can see there's still quite a bit of variability there. The lowest median flow was actually outside of that event for Pariora in April 2001, and the lowest median was recorded during that first prolonged drought period there shown in February 1998. And this is the current, was it last week on the 8th of November, the minimum flow restrictions. I think there's only about 2 more have changed from green to red. So still looking pretty green in that area. Not too many sites on restriction yet. A couple on partial restriction in the yellow, and a lot of sites on normal full take. So yeah.
So then we'll just move on to the last slide. So I guess the key message there is, as of October, things are looking pretty average, pretty normal in terms of stream flows. Fortunately, I recall it was getting a bit dry in September, but then we had some rain in October, which has actually just brought everything back to kind of pretty typical levels for this time of year. Probably just noting that, I'm sure as you're well aware, there isn't much snow in that hill and high country, and so despite flows at the moment being normal, there isn't a lot of snowpack there to provide that spring high flow, and we are starting to get warmer weather. So if it does progress into a more severe El Nino, we can expect drier conditions, hotter conditions, greater evapotranspiration. The river flows are likely to become stable and possibly low. What that means for sort of more water quality issues, one of the key issues is likely to see more cyanobacteria growth across our rivers, particularly in the Timaru district. More likely to see health warnings related to those cyanobacteria blooms across our rivers. So we're anticipating that. It happens most seasons, but during a drier, hotter period, it's more likely to be across a larger number of rivers and for an extended period of time. If conditions got really severe, which we're not anticipating at this stage, other issues like fish strandings can occur that require fish salvage efforts, and we are doing a bit of work just to provide some information for the community if that does occur, how to deal with fish salvaging. So that's pretty much it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Shirley and Lucy, and thank you, Paul, for your presentation as well. Do we have any questions for anyone? Councillor Booth.
Thanks for that. So considering that, then, what's the message to us? Is it therefore we should keep our reservoirs topped up with every opportunity to ensure that we're not sort of running out of water? Because that'll be the thing that we'll have. Are we sort of past that stage that we have water restrictions on a regular basis in dry periods? I mean, perhaps Andrew might be able to answer that.
Yeah, is Mr. Dixon still here? I can't see him, sorry. Oh, he's just left the building, but perhaps that's something we could ask him, Councillor Booth, when he's back in the room. Yep. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Just curious, how do you know if someone has a burner that's over 15 years of age? How do you work that out?
Yeah, it's based on building consent information. So we receive information from Timaru District Council on building consents that have been issued. If someone's removed their burner and replaced it with a heat pump, we won't know about that because we based on consent information. So yeah, there's a chance that we'll mail out people that have already kind of taken out their burner, but we'll be asking people to kind of get in contact if the information we've got is incorrect. Yeah, we can adopt that.
So if someone has got a burner that's, say, 30 or maybe even 40 years old, what are you going to go door knocking and say, look, we've got information here that says you've got a burner that's over 15 years old, you need to do something about it? I mean, and why hasn't that been done already?
That has been done in the past, actually. We had some rules, some dates that kicked in the plan back in 2017, and there was some more proactive work done, particularly in Timaru, back at that time, when we did look for older burners in use. We'd like to take an education approach. We'd like people to make those changes voluntarily and to support low-income households to make that change. But yeah, I mean, if air quality continues, if air quality doesn't improve, then we might need to do some more proactive work and go door to door. But yeah, I'm not sure we'd go back to some of the work in the past where we're looking for smoky chimneys in use. Yep.
Well, thank you. I just have a question about air quality, and then we'll come to you, Mr Dixon, to answer Councillor Booth's question. But the social cost of 2.86 billion, is that a recent figure? So after the changes and the massive decline we've seen in Timaru in the air quality, or is that prior to we made those changes, do you think?
Yeah, the health data in that report comes from 2016. So yeah, so it's, I mean, it's relatively recent. It was an update on a previous report from 2006. So yeah, it does take into account the improvements that we've seen in recent years. But it really indicates that these there are health impacts at much lower concentrations than we previously anticipated.
I guess it also highlights, given our previous conversation, that as we transition to a lower carbon economy, there is going to be health benefits, and I wonder if that's taken into the work that ECA have done around the RETA project with the transformation to carbon away from the boilers at Washdyke, and if that's in that report, which I've looked at, but I can't remember if it is, but yeah, thank you for that. Mr Dixon, Councillor Booth had a question around the level of water in our water reserves, and if you foresee us going on to restrictions anytime soon. Does that
yeah, I guess we've just been advised that perhaps there's an El Nino event going to occur, and so therefore I was sort of thinking, well, considering that, what sort of level do you keep the reservoirs at? Are they 80% or are they always 100%? And then obviously you've got plenty of options now. We've been spending all that money on the pipes and etc., and we haven't got our brown dirty water any longer. So are we in a better, more resilient position?
Well, the reservoirs themselves at the moment are 100% full. We keep them as full as we can at all times because you never know when you're going to get a dry period. We are restricted at times on our water take as the rivers get lower. But there is a good flow in the rivers at the moment, no problem. In fact, we have actually got our Pariora line shut down at the moment because we're finishing off the lining of the section 2 through there. So, yeah, we are in a very good space at present in the rain. We have been doing a lot of work with the Met Service and getting some long-term forecasts, particularly around, we know that El Nino weather pattern has come upon us, which generally brings drier weather. The Met Service forecast is indicating that, in fact, South Canterbury is going to receive pretty much normal rainfall, so which is really good. So at this stage, certainly not anticipating any water restrictions, but, you'd never know. You are worrying, dependent on the weather and nature. So, but
thank you, Mr.
I have a
Dixon.
question, Michelle.
Yeah, no, I just saw that. Sorry, Councillor Shannon. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our Environment Canterbury teams for their presentations this morning. Just looking at where the air quality is being measured in Timaru. So if I'm looking at that map there, what that suggests to me is that Anzac Square has an air quality issue, not necessarily all of Timaru, just looking at that map. And are there any plans to be measuring it in West Timaru, for example? Because to me, it's a very different environment. So if we're presenting figures that are representative of Timaru, which is a large area, should we really be just presenting figures from Anzac Square?
I'll hand that question over to my colleagues in Christchurch, Angie and Teresa.
Kia ora. Yeah, thank you. Good question. We looked quite some time ago, looked at concentrations across Timaru to see how much it varied. And we found that the concentrations that you get at Anzac Square are quite similar to what you get across a lot of Timaru. And with our monitoring, because we're comparing it with health guidelines and we've got a national environmental standard, we're actually required to monitor in the worst place. And so that's pretty much why we do measure where we do. But like I said, it was quite interesting to see that the kinds of concentrations that we get at Anzac Square are actually very typical of sort of a much wider area within Timaru itself. While there are some variations, it was fairly uniform across, a decent size area.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'll move to the recommendation that the Environmental Services Committee receives and notes the update on the Environment Canterbury post-winter air briefing and district groundwater quality. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Jackson, and would someone like to second? Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, the team at ECAN, for giving us that presentation, and Mr Burrell, Mr Dixon, thank you. So, there being no urgent business items or minor natures, I can close the meeting. Thank you, everyone.